From childhood, I was raised in the Sam family, groomed to be their future daughter-in-law. At 21, after Sam had a drunken mishap with me, he naturally married me. Back then, I was too overjoyed at my wish being fulfilled, never realizing that his heart already belonged to another woman. 3 years into our marriage, the woman named Lily suddenly returned to the country. That day, Sam cut his hair, changed into a new shirt, and didn't come home all night. Meanwhile, I was left forgotten in a swirling snowstorm. Sam returned home the next morning. The house was silent, afraid of disturbing his wife's rest. He went straight to the study. The study was unchanged, except that on the desk lay a photo and a piece of paper. The photo was one Lily had gifted him years ago. On the back he had written, "Longing for you, remembering you always," and beside it, on the blank paper, was his wife Zoe's graceful handwriting. Sam, I will set you free. Chapter 1. The snow fell heavily, like torn cotton spread across the sky. I stood under the eaves at the cemetery's gate and took out my phone. I dialed Sam's number for the second time. It rang for a few seconds before being hung up. I stood there in a daze. Snowflakes, carried by the wind, lashed against my face, chilling me to the bone. When he dropped me off at the cemetery, Sam said there would be heavy snow today, and he would come pick me up early. But now, the snow was thick on the ground. The winding mountain road stretched ahead, and still there was no sign of him. "Miss, if you don't head down now, it'll be too late," the old caretaker said, rubbing his hands with worry. "If the snow seals the mountain, no cars will get in or out." I pressed my lips together and dialed a third time. The ringing continued, and just as it was about to stop, someone picked up. A wave of warmth surged in my chest, quickly followed by a flood of grievance. "Sam," but in my frozen ears, it wasn't Sam's voice that came through. It was a gentle, tender female voice. "Hello, are you looking for Sam? He's not available to take the call right now." Chapter 2. A buzzing sound exploded in my ears. It felt like all the blood in my body rushed straight to my head. That morning, Sam had unexpectedly chosen a white shirt he usually avoided, but he paired it with an old, outdated tie. When he came to pick me up for the cemetery, I noticed he had gotten a haircut, looking vibrant and refreshed. He even seemed to be in a good mood, unusually gentle for his typically aloof nature. Before leaving the house, he had tenderly helped me wrap my scarf. In our 3 years of marriage, such moments of warmth were rare. I stood frozen, unable to utter a sound, staring blankly into the thickening snow. The woman's gentle voice sounded again. "Hello, are you still there? Did you dial the wrong number? What a strange person," she murmured softly, and then hung up. Chapter 3. I gave some money to the cemetery caretaker. He drove his second-hand van to take me down the mountain. When I returned to Jingyuan, it was already late at night. That was the house where Sam and I lived after marriage. It was especially serene and beautiful when it snowed. After a hot bath, I stood for a long time outside Sam's study. Finally, I pushed the door open and went in. The second day after our wedding, he had coldly and sternly warned me, "Don't enter my study without permission, and if you must go in, don't touch anything inside." Since I had loved him from a young age, of course, I had always obeyed. But now, standing before his desk, I picked up the book lying face down on it. Inside, there was an old photograph. The girl in the photo had a young, innocent face, smiling at the camera with a gentle and shy expression. On the back of the photo, there were a few lines of small writing. "To Sam, from Lily." Below it, in Sam's handwriting, was a note. "Thinking of you, remembering you always." Chapter 4. When the tears rolled down, I suddenly laughed out loud. Our marital home was called Jingyuan, Serene Garden. I had thought the name came from its quiet, elegant beauty, but now, I finally understood with a piercing clarity. Perhaps it was named for her. For Lily. I put down the photo as I wiped away my tears. I couldn't help but mock myself for realizing everything too late. The signs had long been there. Recently, Sam had suddenly started flying to France frequently. I had thought it was for business and paid no mind. And for almost a month, he, once passionate in bed, had grown cold and distant. Even 2 nights ago, when I swallowed my pride and tried to initiate intimacy, he pushed me away. But before, after marriage, he had almost demanded me every night. He was so passionate in bed. It made me forget just how distant and silent he was by day. Only now did I finally realize it had always been a one-sided performance. But if he had loved someone else all along, why, 3 years ago, had he clung to me after drinking? That night, on my 21st birthday, Sam drunkenly burst into my room. "Zoe, you want this so badly?" He tore apart my thin nightdress, his dark eyes brimming with desperate lust. "Then I'll give it to you, I'll grant you what you want." He lowered his head and kissed me, the kisses burning and fervent. Even when he entered me, he was rough, showing little tenderness. I was scared and in pain, but still secretly overjoyed. Years of secret love felt as if they had finally borne fruit that night. At the peak of our entanglement, he clung tightly to me, refusing to leave my body. "Don't push me away. Don't reject me again. Say you love me. Say you'll never leave me." Choking back my shyness and pain, I repeated over and over that I loved him. My heart was bursting with happiness, willing to offer him my very soul. How could I have known? That night, Sam wasn't losing control because of love or passion. He never loved me. He never had. I turned and left the small building, looking at Jingyuan, quiet and snow-covered. I knew it clearly. I could no longer stay here. Not for even a single minute. Chapter 5. At dawn, when the snow had stopped, Sam asked the driver to take him back to Jingyuan. He had been in a great mood last night, drank too much, and, coinciding with the heavy snow, ended up staying at a hotel. But his biological clock was as precise as ever. So even with a hangover, he still woke up before daylight. After a brief moment of confusion, he suddenly remembered. Yesterday was his mother-in-law's death anniversary. He had promised Zoe he would pick her up early to bring her home. A pang of guilt rose in his heart. When Zoe was a child, she had lost both parents in an accident. Sam's family took her in. They grew up together like siblings. He had always cared for her as a younger sister, until the year she turned 21. That night, she had drugged his drink. Then, wearing only a thin nightdress, she had clung tightly to him, holding on to him desperately, under the overwhelming effect of the drug. He had lost all control. That night, he mistook her for Lily. Even now, he still remembered. Zoe cried miserably under him, yet kept repeating to him, "Sam Gidge, I love you so much. I will never leave you. I will stay by your side forever." Of course she dared say that. The elders at home loved her dearly. The next day, once everything was discovered, they immediately forced him to marry her. Sam let out a cold, silent laugh. She had gotten exactly what she wished for. But what about Lily? His marriage had broken Lily's heart. In despair, she had left the country and vanished. For so many years, she never gave him the slightest word. Sam sighed heavily, pressing his aching temples. The car slowly pulled into Jingyuan's gates. All around, there was complete silence. The main house lights were off. Sam knew Zoe loved to sleep in, especially in winter, so he didn't go to the master bedroom. Instead, he headed straight to the study. Chapter 6. The door to the study was still slightly ajar, unlocked. On the second day of their marriage, he had warned Zoe not to step inside. She had always been obedient. For the past 3 years, she had never once set foot in it. He pushed the door open. Everything inside was just as he had left it. The copy of In Search of Lost Time he had been rereading recently was still lying face down on the desk. But next to it, there was something new, a photograph and a piece of white paper. Sam's heart tensed. He rushed over to the desk, picking up the photo. He saw Lily's familiar face smiling up at him. Underneath the photo, pressed flat, was a sheet of paper. The handwriting was delicate yet sharp. There were only a few simple words. At a glance, he recognized Zoe's handwriting. "Sam, I set you free." Chapter 7. He didn't know how long he had stood in front of the desk, When he finally came back to his senses, the piece of paper was already crumpled tightly in his hand. Then he noticed the gold pen lying nearby. It was the wedding gift Zoe had given him. And now, she had used this very gift to deliver him another surprise. Sam seemed to lower his head and let out a quiet laugh. He turned and strode swiftly out. When he reached the master bedroom, he pushed the door open, only to find the room completely empty. He stood there for a full 30 seconds, then let out an incredulous laugh. Yesterday, he had indeed felt a twinge of guilt for forgetting to pick her up, but now, that feeling had completely vanished. Sam's face grew cold. He tossed the crumpled ball of paper heavily into the trash can, then turned and headed downstairs. Halfway down, his phone suddenly rang. A sharp jolt ran through him. He quickly picked it up, but the name flashing on the screen was Lily. Sam brushed aside the faint trace of disappointment in his heart and answered the call. Lily, what's up? Sam, how about going to the hot spring resort in a few days? Bring your wife along too. I'd love to meet her properly. I'm really curious what kind of woman your wife is. Sam inexplicably felt a surge of irritation. I'm not bringing her. She's willful and troublesome. She'd just spoil the mood. She's still young after all. Young? 24 and still young? You were far more sensible at that age. Lily only chuckled lightly. What's wrong with you today? Why such a bad temper early in the morning? Nothing, just annoyed. Then, shall I come keep you company? Lily's voice was still soft and tender. Just like years ago. The inexplicable fury inside him slowly eased. His tone softened. Let's have lunch together. I'll come pick you up. Okay, I'll be waiting. Chapter 8. In the few days after I left Jingyuan, Sam didn't call me once. He had always been like this. Distant. Indifferent. Never the one to reach out first. During those days, I visited several lawyers, consulting about the divorce. Once the papers were ready, I was about to return to the Sam family's old mansion, when an unknown number suddenly called. A woman's intuition made me immediately think of Lily. I hesitated for a few seconds, but still pressed answer. Hello. Who is this? For a long while, there was only silence. Just as I was about to hang up, the person on the other end finally spoke. Jingyuan is beautiful, isn't it? The same voice as that night. Gentle, soft, like the spring rains of Jiangnan. Yet it made it hard for me to breathe. If you have something to say, just say it. I dug my nails tightly into my palm, letting the pain engulf me little by little. Zoe, broken mirrors are hard to repair, but I have confidence. Do you know why? Why? Because something unattainable is unforgettable, but something attained and then lost cuts even deeper. Jingyuan itself is the best answer. Isn't it? Lily was right. Jingyuan was always there. Eternal. Every time he left home. Every time he returned. Seeing the word Jingyuan would remind him of her. This was what it meant to think of her constantly, and never be able to forget. Chapter 9. Sam gradually sensed that something was wrong. Zoe still hadn't returned to Jingyuan, nor had the Sam family's old mansion called to inquire. Over the past 3 years, Zoe would occasionally throw little tantrums. Whenever that happened, she would move back to the old mansion for a few days, and each time, either Grandpa or Sam's mother would call him to ask him to bring Zoe home. In the past, he had found her little tricks annoying, but now, her sudden silence left him strangely unsettled. Sam thought for a moment and then called his mother. Standing under the eaves, he casually exchanged some small talk before getting to the point. Did Zoe go back to the old house? Is she crying in front of you and Grandpa again these days? Sam's mother paused for a moment. Then she finally spoke. Yes, she did come back. The haze clouding Sam's mind seemed to clear significantly. He teasingly played with the finches, a faint smile tugging at his lips. She must be making life difficult for you and Grandpa again, right? Fine. I'll go pick her up. Otherwise, she'll turn the whole old house upside down. Sam's mother suddenly interrupted him. Zoe has already left. She handed me some things and then left. No matter how I tried, I couldn't make her stay. Sam's mother's voice began to choke up. What exactly did you do to hurt her like this? Sam's hand froze midair. The pampered little golden finches chirped in alarm. He slowly snapped back to reality, though his face remained calm. What did she give you? If she wants to leave, let her. Where else can she go? Anyway? Yes. The world was vast. But Zoe had only ever had the Sam family as her home. He wasn't afraid she'd leave. She loved him too much to really go. Sam's mother seemed to stifle a sob. It's the divorce papers. Zoe said she wants to divorce you. She wants to leave the capital and never come back. For a moment, Sam's ears rang with silence. The sky in the distance loomed heavy and dark, as if a new snowfall was imminent. His mother said something else, but he didn't hear a word. It wasn't until she called his name several times that he finally came back to himself. What else did she say? Nothing. She didn't say anything. She just asked me to find a time to hand the divorce papers to you. A cold wind suddenly picked up, sweeping snowflakes into his face. The sting was almost cruel. Sam raised his hand to brush the snow away, his voice still eerily calm. I'll come pick them up now. He asked the driver to prepare the car to head back to the Sam family's old house. As the car pulled out of Jingyuan, he lifted his gaze to the window. The heavy clouds pressed low across the sky. A blizzard was coming, and suddenly, he remembered that night when the snow fell endlessly. No cars had left Jingyuan. So, how had Zoe left? Chapter 10. It was Sam's mother who called me back, but the voice on the other end of the line belonged to Sam. I've read the divorce agreement. There are a few terms I object to. I stood by the hotel's floor-to-ceiling window, gazing out at the sea of city lights. The world draped in silver snow. Only when a dull pain spread slowly from the depths of my heart did I finally find my voice. All right, I'll have my lawyer contact you. Zoe, I don't have time to waste arguing with your lawyer. Then what do you want? Let's talk face to face. If it goes smoothly, I'll sign immediately. Fine. Where are you? I'll send a driver to pick you up. No need. Just tell me where to meet. I'll come over. Because of the snow, I was delayed a bit on the way. By the time I arrived, I was about 20 minutes late. Sam hated lateness more than anything. When I entered, he was checking his watch, his face visibly dark with displeasure. Upon seeing me, the temperature in the room seemed to drop even further. Even the gold-rimmed glasses perched on his high nose bridge seemed to flash with cold indifference. I lowered my head and gave a soft, bitter laugh. When you don't like someone, even the slightest mistake becomes intolerable. Sorry, there was a traffic jam. Your excuses have nothing to do with me. I took a deep breath, standing before him. Sorry to waste your precious time. Sam's hand, holding the divorce papers, paused slightly. Sit down. Let's talk. I sat down across from him. Which terms do you object to? Grandfather once said, if we divorce within 10 years, regardless of who is at fault, I won't inherit his shares. Sam chuckled lightly. Zoe, you knew this, didn't you? That's why you initiated the divorce. To threaten me? Chapter 11. I slowly lifted my eyes, calmly looking at him. The man before me had been my husband for 3 years, the one I had secretly loved since my youth. Yet he was also someone I had never truly seen through, never truly entered his heart. He pushed the divorce agreement back toward me, stood up, and ordered without leaving any room for discussion. Go pack your things. Come back to Jingyuan with me tonight. I can pretend none of this ever happened. Sam, but I interrupted him. I will go see Grandpa and talk to him about this. I'll make sure it won't affect your inheritance of the shares. Zoe, we both know how much Grandpa favors you. When they forced you onto me back then, how could they possibly let you go easily now? Sam tugged at his tie. His brows furrowed, his expression grim, and his voice was devoid of any warmth. It felt like someone had ripped open my heart, leaving a bloody gash. After 3 years, he had finally spoken the truth he had suppressed all along. Poor him, the golden boy, still burdened by such grievances. I wanted to laugh, but my eyes stung painfully, even though I didn't want to cry. The tears still slipped out uncontrollably. I'm very sorry, Sam. I clutched the divorce agreement tightly, my voice trembling so much that my whole body shook. I'm sorry for wasting 3 years of your life, for taking the place of Mrs. Sam. Zoe, in any case, I'll do everything I can to convince Grandpa to take back his decision. So you won't be burdened anymore. I turned and walked away, just 2 steps out. His voice echoed behind me. Feeling so wronged now? Didn't you think of that when you schemed against me back then? I turned back to look at Sam, stunned. Scheme against you? He gave a faint, indifferent smile, then withdrew his gaze coldly. Zoe, I'll give you one last chance. Come back to Jingyuan tonight, and everything will be erased. Sam, I will never go back. Sam stared at me for 3 seconds. Then when he spoke again, his voice was as cold as ice. As you wish. Chapter 12. Sam was holding his tea, staring out the window, until Lily called his name twice, snapping him back to reality. What are you daydreaming about? The tea's gone cold. Lily smiled and took the cup from his hands, replacing it with a fresh one. Sam lowered his head and took a small sip. The tea was excellent, but he couldn't taste a thing. Lily also held a cup of tea, sitting beside him. Your wife still refuses to come home. Sam immediately frowned. Don't mention her. Lily's eyes were always calm and serene. And when she looked at someone, it felt as if she could soothe their heart as well. I've thought it over. Sam, I think I'll return to France. Why so suddenly? Lily simply smiled warmly. When I'm unhappy, I especially hope the people I care about can be happy. You and your wife have been so loving these 3 years. Yet ever since I came back, everything turned chaotic. This has nothing to do with you, Sam said. It's her own unruly behavior, spoiled by the elder's affection, getting more and more out of hand. Thinking of how the old man scolded him over the phone, Sam grew even more irritable. He hadn't expected Zoe to actually go see the old man. She seemed determined to go against him this time, and he had never really thought about divorcing her. He thought he could let her throw tantrums as she wished. Eventually, she would come around, but now, everything was moving beyond his control. How nice! Lily suddenly smiled faintly, but tears slowly welled up. Why are you crying, Lily? I just envy your wife a little. Lily raised her tear-streaked face, looking pitifully fragile. Sam, thinking of her lonely background, felt pity rise. Unlike her, who lost her parents early but still had your whole family to protect and love her, I had no one to rely on, no one to guide me when I was lost. She choked on her sobs. I once said I would never regret it, but now I do. If I hadn't given up that child back then, would there still have been hope for us? Lily, Sam abruptly set his teacup down and stood up. The past is the past. There's no what if. You still hate me, don't you? Hate me for aborting our child? For leaving without a word? Sam shook his head. I never hated you. It was me who wronged you. Whatever you did, it wasn't too much. Tears poured down Lily's cheeks. She threw herself into Sam's arms. No, you hated me. I was too foolish, too intolerant. I lost control seeing Zoe flaunt her marriage with you. Sam's jaw tightened. His complexion turned pale. Lily's sobs were like thin threads tightening around his heart. Sam, after losing our child, I regretted it immediately. I dream about him often, a little boy, looking just like you, asking me why I abandoned him. Her cries grew louder. Sam, do you think he'll ever forgive me? Sam slowly lowered his head, gently cupping her face, tenderly wiping away every tear, until he tasted the saltiness of her tears. He'll forgive you. He knows you didn't mean to leave him behind. Then will he come back? Will he forgive me? He will come back. Lily stood on tiptoes, wrapped her arms around Sam's neck, and kissed him passionately. In all these years apart, I never loved anyone else. Let's bring him back. Sam, okay? She slipped her dress off her shoulders, just as the pale, tender skin came into view. Sam inexplicably thought of Zoe. That drunken, chaotic night. Zoe's young, delicate body, emerging slowly under the dim light. He didn't know why. At such a moment, with Lily pouring out her love and sorrow, his mind drifted to his wife. But when Lily grabbed his hand and placed it on her chest, he recoiled as if shocked. His phone was buzzing incessantly, a lifesaver. Sorry. I need to take this call. Lily bit her lip, feeling a wave of unspeakable disappointment, but thinking of how tenderly Sam had just looked at her. She quickly boosted her confidence again. Love was fleeting and unreliable, but a man's guilt and pity, those were powerful enough to last a lifetime. She wanted Sam to feel guilty about her forever, wanted Sam to never be able to let her go, to be like Jing Yuan, etched into his life, never fading away. Yet Sam's next words shattered her hopes. What did you say? Zoe just fainted? The doctor says she's pregnant? Chapter 13. Sam was on the phone, grabbing his coat and walking out at the same time. Lily stood there, stunned. By the time she came back to her senses, Sam had already opened the door. Sam! She rushed after him, clutching his sleeve tightly. Sam turned around and saw Lily's red, swollen eyes from crying. But at that moment, those tearful eyes overlapped with the image of Zoe's tear-filled gaze that day. What was he doing? His story with Lily was long over. His wife was Zoe. He had never truly considered divorcing Zoe. And yet, here he was, entangled with Lily again. Whatever affection and fate they once had, it had long ended. If he hadn't lost control with Zoe that night, if Lily hadn't aborted the child back then, maybe their story would have been different. But now, there was no turning back. In the end, he pushed Lily's hand away. Sorry, Lily, I have to go back now. You heard it yourself. My wife, she's pregnant. What about me? What about me? Sam? Tears poured down Lily's face. You love her now, don't you? But you clearly said you would only love me in this lifetime. You even built Jing Yuan for me. Lily. Sam frowned slightly and interrupted her. I admit it. I did love you very much once. I also admit that the name Jing Yuan was because of you. But that's all in the past. I have a wife now. I never planned to divorce her. And now, she's carrying my child. Sam raised his hand, gently wiping the tears from Lily's face. I don't want to make the same mistake again. Sam. Lily tried to hold onto his hand, but without hesitation. He turned and strode out of the room. He said he didn't want to make another mistake. But what about her? What about the child she had lost? Lily watched as he left without a single glance back, then collapsed onto the floor as if all strength had drained from her body. Had she truly made a mistake back then? If she had endured the scorn and humiliation from Sam's family, if she had swallowed her pride just a little longer, would things have turned out differently? Maybe she wouldn't have been abandoned by Sam. Again, Lily covered her face, large tears seeping through her fingers, but she cried without making a single sound. Chapter 14. When I woke from my deep sleep, the first thing I saw was Sam sitting by the bedside. You're awake? He looked a little haggard, but his eyes were filled with undisguised joy. What happened to me? I weakly opened my eyes and looked around. This seemed to be the room I used to live in at Sam's family estate. But why was I here? Hadn't Grandpa promised me to cancel that decision? Hadn't he also agreed to let me divorce Sam? Why was I still living in Sam's house? And why was Sam looking at me like this? Do you want some water? Are you hungry? I'll have the kitchen make you something. Sam's hand landed lightly on my forehead, checking my temperature. Good. No fever. Why am I here? What exactly happened to me? Zoe. Sam suddenly grasped my hand. I tried to pull away, but he held on very tightly. You're pregnant. We're going to have a baby. What did you say? I was stunned, my eyes widening in disbelief. We're having a baby. Zoe, you're going to be a mother. Sam lowered his head, gently kissing the center of my brow. From now on, you can't throw childish tantrums anymore. Otherwise, the baby in your belly will laugh at you too. In the 3 years of our marriage, even during our most passionate nights, there were only tender kisses and a few whispered words of affection. He had never looked at me like this before, had never whispered to me this gently. How ridiculous. All it took was a tiny life growing inside me. It won't happen, I said, pushing his hand away and murmuring softly. What won't happen? The baby won't laugh at me. How do you know that? Because. I raised my eyes, looking at him calmly yet resolutely. I don't want this child. Chapter 15. Sam lost his temper badly. Since childhood, he had never been someone who easily showed emotions, even in the 3 years after our marriage. Although he didn't love me, he had never lost his temper at me. But when I told him once again that I didn't want this child, Sam actually lost control and smashed the cup in front of him. The noise quickly alarmed the elders in the house. Grandpa called him away. Sam's mother stayed with me, her face showing traces of tears, both joyful and sorrowful, seeing the marks of crying on her face. I couldn't help but feel a sharp pain in my heart. When I came to the Sam family, I was only 5 years old. Sam's mother pitied my orphan situation and took me in to raise me as her own. Those years of gentle, unconditional love, how could I ever forget them? Mom, I'm sorry. I buried myself in her arms and cried softly. Silly child, what are you apologizing for? It's Sam's fault for throwing a tantrum and scaring you. I'll scold him later. No, I'll beat him up. Mom, I lifted my head from her embrace. In that moment, I didn't even dare meet her eyes. But how could I accept it? That the husband I loved so deeply had always harbored another woman in his heart, even in the moments he held me most intimately, and even more, that our wedding house was named after another woman. I'm really sorry. I don't want this child. I fought back tears that threatened to overflow, biting my lip hard. I've disappointed you and Grandpa. Sam's mother sat there in a daze, silent for a long time. Finally, tears burst from her eyes. Zoe, could you really not give Sam one more chance? Her hand trembled violently, gripping mine tightly, unwilling to let go. Zoe, Mom is begging you. Okay? All these years, I've raised you like my own daughter, and I've never once begged you for anything. This time, even if it's just once, let me beg you, all right? Watching her tears fall like strings of pearls, hearing her plead with me again and again, pleading with me, someone who owed the Sam family a debt beyond repaying. In the end, I couldn't harden my heart anymore. Maybe it was also because I had been an orphan myself. Now, in this world, only this tiny life inside me was truly connected to my blood. My heart finally softened. I sat there, dazed, tears streaming down uncontrollably. Mom, let me think about it again. Sam's mother was instantly overjoyed. All right. Mom won't disturb you anymore. Good girl. Take your time to think. She left. There were faint sounds outside. Moments later, a servant brought in a bowl of soup, whispering cautiously, "Young madam." The old master was very angry just now. He ordered young Master Sam to kneel outside in the snow. He said, "Only when you forgive him can he get up." I lifted the quilt and got out of bed. Walking to the window, outside, the sky was heavy and gray. It had started snowing again. The cobblestone paths in the garden were covered with a thick blanket of snow. Sam was kneeling there, his back straight. I subconsciously bit my lip, my chest swelling with a sour, aching feeling, making my nose sting uncontrollably. I watched for a moment, then closed the curtains, and returned to sit quietly by the bed. Chapter 16. When night fell, the servant told me that Sam was still kneeling in the snow, his clothes completely soaked through. I went to see Grandpa. "You don't have to plead for him," he said heavily, "unless you're willing to forgive him. Otherwise, I'd rather have a great-grandchild than keep that useless brat around." Grandpa sat there, sighing deeply. He and his father are both the same kind of bastards. I didn't fully understand what he meant by that. I wanted to ask further, but just then a servant rushed in, saying Sam had just fallen down, yet still forced himself back onto his knees. Outside, the snow was falling even thicker. In such a harsh winter, if he kept kneeling, his legs would probably be ruined. Sam and I didn't have any deep hatred between us. On the contrary, the Sam family had shown me endless kindness. I couldn't let it get to that extreme. "Grandpa," I spoke calmly, "let him get up. As for the child, I'll keep it for now. But, regarding the divorce, I won't compromise." "Zoe," Grandpa looked at me deeply. "Are you really willing to keep this child?" I clenched my damp palms tightly and nodded firmly. That very night, Sam came down with a high fever. He had always been strong and rarely got sick, but this time, his fever lingered for 4 or 5 days. Only when the snow began to stop did he slowly recover. After he got better, Grandpa finally allowed him to come see me. By then, I had insisted on moving out of the Sam family's old mansion, returning to the hotel I had been staying at. Later, when my family's old house was cleaned and repaired, I planned to move back there. The day we met again, it was a rare, sunny day. Sam had lost a lot of weight. His cheeks were visibly sunken. When he saw me, he seemed hesitant, standing there for a long time before finally walking over. He squatted down in front of me. Zoe. He reached out, wanting to hold my hand, but I pulled it away. He didn't force it. Instead, he asked gently, I heard you're having your old house cleaned up. Are you planning to move there? Yes, if you don't want to return to Jingyuan yet. There are other properties under my name. I want to live in my own house, I said, lowering my gaze slowly, one hand subconsciously pressing against my still flat belly. Maybe it's just a woman's instinct. Once you know there's a tiny life inside you, you can't help but worry and care day and night. If you want to live there, it's fine to stay in your house for now. Sam looked at me and added, I'm also having Jingyuan redecorated. I don't want to hear that name again. It feels like a sharp thorn, forever lodged deep in my heart. It hurts even without touching it. I turned my face away, looking out the window. I want to rest for a while. You should leave first. All right. In the end, Sam still reached out, gently brushing his hand over my hair. I tried to avoid his touch, but he withdrew his hand just a second earlier. By the way, he said, I've scheduled a prenatal checkup for tomorrow. I'll come pick you up. I gave no reply. Sam didn't say anything more. He stood up and left. But the next day, I never saw him come. Even as the appointment time drew near, he still hadn't arrived. I simply gathered my documents and prepared to go on my own. But just as I was stepping out the door, Sam's call came through. Zoe, something urgent just came up on my side, he said, sounding anxious. All around him, I could hear the noise and clamor of a crowd. My heart slowly tightened. Did something happen? I asked. No, just a friend ran into a bit of trouble. Don't worry, I'll be there soon. Just stay in the room and wait for me, all right? Sam, I was about to press him for more details, but he had already hung up, just before the line cut off. I vaguely heard a woman's voice, crying, calling his name. I stood there quietly, phone still in hand. For some reason, I suddenly thought back to that snowy day at the cemetery. Deep down, I knew it very clearly. Sam wouldn't be coming back today, but it was fine. I would no longer feel sadness, nor disappointment, because from that day on, I had stopped expecting anything from him. Chapter 17. I didn't stay in the room waiting for him. I grabbed my bag and left. When I took the elevator down to the first floor, I saw the lobby crowded with reporters and media. The noise was deafening, like a chaotic marketplace. The camera flashes were aimed at a couple standing at the center of the crowd. Even from the back, I recognized Sam immediately. His coat was draped over the shoulders of the woman beside him. He was shielding her, holding her close, even covering her head and face carefully. The woman buried her entire face against his chest. In the camera flashes, only Sam's icy cold expression appeared. Mr. Sam, is it true that you and your wife are separated? Is it because of Miss Lily? Mr. Sam, your wife intentionally leaked her stay at a hotel partially owned by Miss Lily. Was it out of revenge, accusing Miss Lily of being a homewrecker? What is your opinion on your wife's behavior? Mr. Sam, is it true that Miss Lily intervened in your marriage? There are rumors that Miss Lily once bore your child. And is it true that your marriage house, Jing Garden, was named after Miss Lily's given name? Suddenly, Sam grabbed a camera almost shoved into his face and smashed it heavily on the ground. The barrage of questions instantly fell silent. Sam coldly swept his gaze across the crowd. First, Whatever happens between my wife and me is our private matter. No comment. Second, Miss Lily did not interfere with my marriage. Nor is she a mistress. Third, Jean Garden is my home with my wife. And has nothing to do with anyone else. But Miss Lily's given name has the character Jing. Sam's gaze turned sharp as he stared at the reporter. There are countless women in the world named Jing. Are you saying they're all involved? As a married man, shielding another woman like this, aren't you afraid of public opinion? Aren't you afraid your wife would be hurt seeing this? If you hadn't surrounded my friend, chasing her into a bathroom so she didn't dare come out, I wouldn't have had to act. Then, Mr. Sam, you mean you have no intention of divorcing your wife? And you and Miss Lily are just ordinary friends? How are things between you and your wife? Sam didn't answer anymore. His bodyguards finally arrived, forcing the crowd apart and escorting the two of them quickly out of the lobby. The reporters were about to rush after them, when suddenly someone shouted, "Sam's wife! Mrs. Sam is over there!" The crowd surged toward me like a tidal wave. Instinctively, I shielded my belly and tried to escape, but someone pushed me hard from behind, caught off guard. I lost my balance and crashed heavily onto the ground. Blood! She's bleeding! Call an ambulance! Quick! Panic-stricken voices blended with the frenzied clicking of shutters. The flashing lights were blinding, and my world, from that sharp, dazzling white, slowly dissolved into utter darkness. I curled up on the cold floor and slowly closed my eyes. Chapter 18. Outside the hospital room, Sam's mother slapped him hard across the face. He stood still, not dodging, not even flinching, even as a clear red handprint bloomed across his cheek. It was as if Sam's mother had used up all her strength. She collapsed onto the bench, murmuring to herself, "It's my fault. I ruined Zoe's happiness. If I had known you would turn out to be worse than a beast, I would rather have never had a son like you. I would have let you and Lily rot together. I would never have tried so hard to push you and Zoe together. This is my karma." She let out a few bitter laughs. But as she laughed, tears streamed down her face. "But your karma is even worse. You fell in love with the daughter of your father's mistress. You even planned to marry her and let her carry your child. Where does that leave me? Your mother? How could I possibly sit back and watch the daughter of that whore enter my home? Sam, the night you and Zoe spent together, I was the one who drugged your drink. I set everything up, forcing you to marry her. I thought I was solving everything, breaking you and Lily apart, fulfilling Zoe's dream. But I was wrong. I destroyed her. You were never worthy of her. And now, you've lost your own child because of that whore. That's your retribution." Sam stared at his mother in disbelief. "What did you say? The drug? It was you?" "Yes. It was me. Why didn't you tell me earlier?" "What could I have said? That a mother drugged her own son to separate him from the daughter of a homewrecker?" She sobbed and laughed brokenly. "Sam, it's true I drugged you, but the dose was very light. Ask yourself, did the drug really make you lose control? Or were you already helplessly drawn to her? Over these 3 years, think about how Zoe treated you. Even a stone would have been warmed by now. But you abandoned your wife at a cemetery. For a bastard child of that woman. Do you even know how badly you hurt her? Do you know how she walked out of Jean Garden that snowy night, one step at a time, against the storm? Jean Garden. What a cruel joke. You humiliated your wife, just to glorify your so-called love. But no matter how noble you think it is, the spawn of a mistress will always be the spawn of a mistress. She will never set foot in our home." Sam stood frozen, his fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He trembled, violently, uncontrollably. The past flashed before his eyes like a spinning carousel. Had it really been the drug that night? Or had he already longed for her deep down? He had selfishly blamed everything on Zoe, enjoying his rights as a husband, yet refusing to give her even a shred of tenderness. Suddenly, Sam turned and rushed to the hospital room. He shoved open the door. Inside, Zoe stood there in a hospital gown, her face pale and tear-streaked. "Zoe!" Sam froze, not daring to take even one step closer, not even daring to lift a hand to wipe away her tears. After a long silence, Zoe finally spoke, her first and last words to him. "Sam, Let's divorce. I never want to see you again. Chapter 19. When I finally recovered and left Beijing. It was nearly the end of the year, and the city was blanketed in heavy snow. Sam's mother came to see me off. I knew Sam was also in the car, but I didn't want to see him. Sam's mother naturally didn't force me. I never blamed her for the things that happened back then. Yet after all the misunderstandings were cleared, I couldn't help but wonder if none of it had happened. What would my life look like now? Maybe I would have married someone I didn't love, living an ordinary life. Maybe I wouldn't have married anyone at all, choosing to live my own life instead. I loved him once. I married him for 3 years. In the end, all I harvested was heartbreak. But fortunately, my health was gradually recovering, and I was still young. There was still a whole life full of possibilities ahead of me. If you have the chance, please come back and visit. Your grandfather and I will always miss you. Sam's mother helped tie my scarf. She looked so much older now, worn down beyond recognition. Losing the child hit her the hardest. Because of that, she was utterly disappointed in Sam. I said. I gently smoothed the white strands at her temples. You and Grandpa must take good care of yourselves. Sam's mother nodded, tears filling her reddened eyes again. I helped her wipe them away, speaking softly. Mom, don't be sad. Do you hate me? She asked. No, I replied. I only remember how much you loved me all these years. Sam's mother covered her mouth and cried. Zoe, Jean Garden is gone. Sam had it torn down. That day at the hotel, it was Lily who leaked the news to the media, orchestrating the whole scene herself. And about your miscarriage, it was Lily who arranged for someone to push you. I froze for a moment. I had thought it was an accident, but it turned out to be deliberate. Still, perhaps it was fate after all. Debt must be repaid. Murder must pay with life. I believe the law will give her the punishment she deserves. Sam's mother gritted her teeth. She even had the nerve to ask people to beg you for forgiveness. I won't forgive her, Mom. No matter what. I won't ever forgive her for this. Sam said the same. He said he would make sure Lily went to prison. I exhaled slowly. Good. Even the deepest love, in the end, could not outweigh blood and family. If I hadn't lost the baby, would Sam still hate her this much? But none of that mattered anymore. I hugged Sam's mother tightly, then turned and got into the car. Zoe, promise you'll come back and see Mom. Sitting inside the car, I couldn't resist opening the window to look back. Through the cold wind, I saw Sam's mother waving at me nonstop. Not far behind her, Sam stood under a withered tree. Tall, elegant, still as handsome and youthful as ever, but he could no longer make my heart race, or bring me sorrow. With just one glance, all the once overwhelming emotions, the grief I thought would never end, had quietly faded away. Just as our eyes were about to meet, I turned my head away and rolled up the window. The road to the airport was long. Halfway there, I drifted off to sleep. In my dream, I returned to my childhood. I was 5 years old when I first arrived at Sam's home. Later, as we grew closer, he would hold me on his knee while practicing calligraphy, guiding my little hand, stroke by stroke, teaching me to write my own name. As I grew older, the copybooks I practiced on were filled with Sam's handwriting. My writing resembled his so much, yet all through those long years, everything he ever wrote was filled with love and longing for Lily, while I had only been chasing the shadow of a cold, unreachable dream. Chapter 20. When Sam turned 35, many of his friends and cousins of the same age had already married and started families with beautiful wives. Yet he remained alone. The demolished Jing garden was never rebuilt. Eventually, the land grew wild and desolate. Sam's mother's health deteriorated year by year, and she spent most of her time recuperating in the south. Reluctant to see him, before the new year, his grandfather succumbed to an illness and passed away. Even on his deathbed, the old man kept calling Zoe's name. Struggling to hold on, just waiting to see her, she landed late at night, rushed over in time, and accompanied the old man through the last brief stretch of his life. At the funeral, Zoe's tears never stopped. She supported Sam's mother, the two women crying their hearts out. After the funeral, Zoe was ready to leave. On the day she departed, they finally spoke for the first time in a long while, but the first thing she said was to call him Brother Sam. Just like she used to before she turned 14, when Jean Garden was torn down. Sam had sorted through the study. He had come across an old diary, from the age of 14 onward. It was filled with a young girl's secret thoughts. Written carefully, each word and stroke full of tender affection. Back then, he used to tease her, asking why she had suddenly stopped calling him brother. Now he understood, just like how he had refused to call Lily older sister, even though she was older than him by half a year. Because of the feelings hidden deep in his heart, many old things in the study had been left behind. But that yellowed diary and the copybooks written by Zoe's hand, he had brought them with him without even thinking. All these years, he rarely dreamed of Zoe, and even when he did, her face was always blurry in the dream. Yet today, she stood vividly before him. He could clearly see her thick, ink-black eyebrows, the dense shadows cast by her long eyelashes under the sun, and the small brown mole near the corner of her eye. He raised his hand, wanting to touch her hair, wanting to jokingly ask, "Why are you calling me brother again?" But in the end, he did nothing. He only gently said, "Come back and visit often. Mom always misses you." "I will," she replied, and then silence fell between them again, until her car arrived. He silently took her suitcase. "Let me walk you out." Zoe seemed a little reluctant, but before she could say anything, he was already pulling her suitcase outside. Every inch of the Sam family's old estate was etched into their memories. They walked through winding paths, through the garden, across the lawn, past the old tree, and for a moment, he thought he heard the echoes of young Zoe's cheerful laughter. She had always been playful by nature, mischievous at heart. She could even climb trees better than he could. Once, she climbed all the way to the top of a tall tree, terrifying everyone at home. Even grandfather was alarmed, hobbling over with his cane, ordering someone to set up a ladder to bring her down. But before anyone could react, she nimbly slid down on her own. Amidst the lush, dense leaves, she called out to him again and again, "Brother Sam, catch me! I'm going to jump." "Don't be ridiculous. You'll fall," he scolded her sternly, his face serious. But she didn't care. Just giggled mischievously and boldly leaped downward. His heart pounded like a drum, but he managed to keep a calm face. He opened his arms steadily, and sure enough, caught her firmly. Sam's mother patted her chest repeatedly in fright, pretending to be angry and threatening to spank her. She hid behind him, spinning and laughing, dodging the pretend scolding. He couldn't help but laugh too, protecting her and pleading on her behalf. And how could anyone in the family ever truly bear to scold her? Everyone loved her so dearly, and so did he. When exactly had everything begun to change? Why could nothing ever go back to the way it once was? He didn't understand. Was it that hearts truly changed so easily? Or was it simply that when we are young, we always fail to cherish the things within our grasp? The grand gate of the old house loomed before them. In his heart rose a foolish, impossible wish. If only they could keep walking forever, never reaching the gate. If only they could return to the past. He would face his heart honestly this time. He would tell her clearly that when he broke up with Lily, his love for her had already faded. What remained afterward was merely guilt and pity for the child they had lost. He had never stopped liking Zoe. He had never not wanted to marry her. During those 3 years of marriage, he had actually felt happy, but it was too late. Zoe got into the car, waved at him with a bright smile, and was about to close the window. He suddenly stepped forward, pressing his hand against the rising window. "Zoe," he called her name. She was looking at her phone, and when she looked up, there was still that sweet smile lingering on her face. His heart twisted sharply with pain. In his ears, a buzzing rose, like the unbearable hum of cicadas in summer. "Is there something else, Brother Sam?" She looked at him, calm and open. He stood there quietly, just watching her, for a long time. Then her phone chimed again. She looked down, the corners of her lips curving slightly, her fingers dancing swiftly over the screen. At last, he took a step back. Nothing. Travel safely. Let me know when you arrive. She nodded, waved at him again, and went back to typing her message with great focus. She didn't even glance at him again. The car started. The car slowly turned at the corner ahead, disappearing from his sight. Time moved forward, quietly and steadily. Year after year, after Lily was released from prison, she pleaded countless times to see him once more. He refused. She tried again through intermediaries, begging and pleading, but he still did not agree to meet her. It was said that later, she married a widower, or perhaps she didn't marry at all. Eventually, there was no more news of her. When he was 42, Sam's mother passed away. Zoe traveled a long way, bringing her husband and children to attend the funeral. That was the last time they ever saw each other in this lifetime. When sending them off, Zoe stood in front of him, her eyes seeming to redden. Yet in the end, she said not a single word to him. He stood outside the gate of the old house, watching their car drive away, motionless for a long, long time, until birds burst from the treetops, flying away with noisy cries. He finally lowered his head and smiled faintly, rubbing the wedding ring on his finger, then turned and walked back into the deep, quiet old house. He followed the same path Zoe had taken when she left, slowly, step by step, returning to the study. There, he took out the gold fountain pen that Zoe had gifted him on their wedding day. He held it for a long time, then finally, slowly wrote a single line on a sheet of paper. 4 more years passed. One spring day, on the anniversary of the spring when he had married Zoe, the servants noticed he hadn't come downstairs for breakfast. Sensing something was wrong, they broke open the door to the study. Inside, they found him sitting in the recliner by the desk, already lifeless. On the desk in front of him, there lay a photo, worn and curled at the edges from years of touching. The smiling figure in the picture was the Zoe from 20 years ago. Scattered across the desk were several sheets of white paper. Using that same golden pen, he had messily written, "Looking back from where the clouds are deepest, only regret that it was all too rushed. Just 3 fleeting years, enough to trap him in place for the rest of his life." While Zoe had long since moved far, far away,